I thank you so much for sharing that. So there's two kind of tracks of questions that I want to ask you. I think the thing that was so powerful about a post that I saw from you, and it resonated with me as someone who also grew up in a religion. I don't know that I would call where I grew up a high demand religion, which is why it was so powerful. But as I talk to more and more people who are on their spiritual journeys, you realize how, for so many people, how they live is so intrinsically connected to how they worship. Yes. And I think that we are so it is very tempting to separate. It's very difficult to separate those two for a lot of people, which I assume is why so many people feel like they don't have a choice but to stay. So that's one track. Can you speak more about that pressure? Because you're not only separating yourself from your faith, you're separating yourself from the humans that are connected to your faith. You're separating from the faith economy. You're separating from how you eat, how you sleep, how you
dress.
And so at what age were you when you started to kind of make that, question it for yourself? And what was the hardest part of the disconnection that you had to make?
Those are great questions. So, kind of when my eyes first started to be open was when I was a missionary. And so I lived in London when I was like 21 and 22. So that was kind of like realizing just what you said, how you worship and how you believe. There might have been a disconnect there. So that was like the first time my eyes were opened. And part of it was logistical. I had just lived in Washington, D.C. I had interned at the United Nations. I had kind of been doing all of this stuff. I go to London, and the people that are in charge of me are young men who are at least 2 to 3 years younger than me, who've never traveled outside of their state. And here we were, we were missionaries, we were proselytizing, and we were trying to help people. And I had already been to Europe, and I had been, my worldview had been opened up, and theirs hadn't. And I wasn't even allowed to share my ideas about how we could do this better. Right. That was my goal. I wasn't searching to be in leadership. I wasn't trying to take their positions. I was just saying, I have some ideas. And I wasn't allowed to share that because of my gender, because of I wasn't in authority. And so that was the first moment. I was 21, 22 when that happened. But when I stepped away from the high demand religion, only 5 years ago. Now, when I said I'm going to stop going to church, there were a few years in there that were tumultuous, inside of me. I was going, but just like you were talking about, I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to make it work. So I would go to church. I would do all of the activities. And I lived in a very small town, a rural small town. And a lot of the people had gone to the same church, and they also worked together. So the community was really enmeshed. So the cost was high. I knew we were going to move. And so I had planned, I will leave when I leave this community. And then I got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. So I was I was probably 39, 40 or something like that when I was like, I'm done. And then I still went for a little bit mentally, but I knew I was going to leave. And then a little bit after that, I said, I'm going to pay the cost. And I remember my first experience of choosing to live how I wanted to live. And I'd never had anxiety before in my life. I don't,
Mm,
I had that, I didn't grow up with anxiety. And in the religion I grew up in, you're not allowed to show your shoulders. And so I put on a tank top and I was going to the store, and I can still feel that feeling in my stomach that someone was going to see me
mm.
in a tank top. It was all of the physical emotions you can think of to go to the store to buy whatever I was going to buy. So I was probably 40 when that happened.
Wow. Where did that courage come from to do that?
Ah, I have 3 daughters. And there are many reasons why I left the high demand religion, but one of the largest ones is that I didn't feel like I had control over myself
Mm,
mentally, over my decision making, over my emotions, over and now on 5 years later, I realize that was just the tip of what I didn't have control over. I've gone through this journey that I still struggle to this day with. There's some serious mental factors that I struggle with, but at the time I just said, I don't feel like I have control. How am I supposed to raise 3 daughters who feel like they can choose who they want to be if I don't feel like I can be who I want to be?
right.
And I've used this word later. I've realized later that I am the map for my daughters' lives. Like they, learn how to interact with people and talk with people and make decisions and have healthy relationships based on who they see around them. And because I am their mother, they're going to see that the most from me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, how am I going to preach this to my daughters, and yet I don't even feel this on my own? And so I'm going to have to start somewhere. And so I just did it. I just did it. I don't know where the courage came from. I mean, honestly, it was, it was a spiritual break free moment, despite the fact that it was about a tank top and shoulders, It was,
and sometimes it's that simple, right? Sometimes it is, the thing I know from talking to, people and, over, these last few years as I've been on my spiritual journey, is that we sometimes think these moments are big, right? These moments of revelation, and often these moments of revelation are small things that small pebbles that create this incredible ripple effect, and then leads to this the aha.
Yeah. That wasn't actually the first thing I had done. The first thing I had done was I decided to drink coffee. And you're not allowed to drink coffee. And I did that in the privacy of my home. Nobody knew that. I mean, my family knew that, but nobody knew that. So, but that was like the first moment, like, I'm going to drink coffee. Like, I remember, like, I got for Mother's Day, like, I got all this, like, my girls got me like mugs because they knew I wanted to start drinking coffee, and so that was a pebble moment. And then the next pebble moment was like a little bit larger of a pebble. Now I'm going to go out in public, and show my shoulders. And those are, now I don't even think about it. I make coffee in the morning and I enjoy it and I relish it, and I show my shoulders and it's not a big deal. But I agree with you. And that's why I go back to the phrase of high demand. If you think those small moments are big moments, then that means there's probably been a lot of demand associated with those small moments, right?
Yeah. And also a lot of, and I guess those demands can sometimes be seen as restrictions, and I can, one of the things that's so clear to me when thinking about high demand religions, uh, is how the experience as a woman in those religions is so drastically different than how that, people, how a man experiences it.
So much.
Yeah. So yeah,
So
tell me
much.
more about that.
Well, the original one that I referenced was when I was on my mission, and all of these, I mean, here I was like, okay, well, I'm not trying to be full of myself, but you guys, I've traveled, I've done these things, and and these 19-year-old boys who had never been outside of Utah, had never been on a plane, who had never, and I'm like, I'm not looking for your position. I'm just saying that my experience is going to add some insight that you might not have had.
Yeah.
And they came back. So at the time you had to be 19 to be a male to go on a mission, and it was a commandment. All men have to go on a mission, but it's not a commandment for females, and they make you wait till you're 21.
Ah,
And so when I would say, hey, let's think about this. Oh, and in addition, a little background, my degree was in international relations. And we're living in London, and if you in South London, and you like meet everyone from every country. So I just have a little bit more context on this situation.
yeah.
And, about refugee. And I had just interned when I said at the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and we were talking with refugees, and there were just all of these pieces that I just had some insight that I wanted to share. And the response back to me was, oh, you only came out here because you're not married yet.
Wow.
This is said to me like in 1999, like I was 21. But that was a legitimate perception, right, on
Right.
that situation. And that was pretty big too, because my dad was a college professor. Remember, my parents were liberal hippies. So I've always grown up with this. I remember talking with other college professors. I had grown up around people that had made it work. And I didn't, I mean, my dad rode his bike to school every day, and he was a surfer, and we didn't have a TV. And so there was a lot in my home that aligned with what was more inside of me. But then we were kind of still also living this Mormon thing. And so then I would go to church, and if I wasn't in my home anymore, then that's when the disconnect was way more prevalent.
Mm.
And it couldn't be hidden anymore. And there were many times where it was very difficult. I was, you know, there were situations where it was just really hard. It was really hard. I can't remember what year it was, when there was a movement within the Mormon church that women were trying to get the priesthood. And man, I was I was living in Nebraska, and I was so scared to say that I aligned with the movement because I thought I would be disciplined for
Right.
that.
Right.
I mean, there was a movement to wear pants to church. We had to band together on this blog. You know what I mean? And so it's like, so all of these things that are there, none of that is spiritual. Well, I don't know. The ordained women is a little bit, because you're saying you have access to the power of God. And that was a pretty big moment for me, because I was like, why do you have access to the power of God, but I don't? Like, I'm very confused about that, because I am the one in this situation. Like, I was always the one that was asked to teach gospel doctrine and talk about these ideas. And everybody's like, man, just the things you're talking about, I feel really close to God. And I looked at the scripture in a different way. And I was like, so are you saying that those ideas that I had weren't spiritual?
Right.
Because I tell you, that was authentic and vulnerable and a spiritual journey that I still value. But I didn't have the priesthood. So what you know what I mean? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
So that was another part of, I think that's been one of the biggest things of leaving, is not feeling like I have to be beholden to someone.
Mm. Yeah. So the how, what was the break? What did the break feel like for you? Like, did it and where I'm kind of going to, or where I want to lead the conversation is you said something on social media that I thought was super powerful, and it's actually the reason why this show is called Divine Disconnection is that I think there is this opportunity for us to when you leave a spiritual practice, a religious practice, I think something that happens is as you said on in your post, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so how do you separate this definition that you have built that is important, right? Like I resisted thinking about myself as a spiritual person, even though after I left my church, I had traveled to India and
right.
like I had been adopting spiritual practices
Right.
and creating spiritual practices, but not connecting them to religion. And having awful things to say about religion
Right.
globally. And it's only been in these last few years that I've been like, you know what? There are some of those things that I actually like.
Right.
And that I want to be able to have, to live by.
Yeah.
That is in a non-denominational way, and not feel guilty that the thing that I am connected to is connected to religion.
Right. That, I cannot tell you how much I resonate with what you just said, because that's been a journey for me. So I remember, probably the first year that I didn't go to church, I was still living in Nebraska, but it was very much like a cat and mouse. Like, I really let a lot of people down. I probably didn't do the best, but I was doing the best I could. You know what I mean? And I know that now, and it is what it is. So that was not a spiritual moment. That was like courageous and anxiety and, pebbles. When and then I moved to Oklahoma, and holy cow, that was a fascinating environment to move to, because now I'm in the Bible Belt.
Right.
And I moved to, again, another small town, and religion, man, I thought, I've never seen religion, and I've never lived in Utah, BS, so I don't know how Utah runs Mormonism, but man, I mean, there was so much religion in the schools. There was my mind was blown. Like I have stories about that, but people would say phrases to me, and I immediately was defensive and rejected them because of exactly what you said. I was in a place where I could not separate the thing from the emotion of the thing.
Right.
So I could not separate my experience about the one I'm recircling recently, and I'm welcoming it back into my life recently, is faith. Because faith was really a struggle for me. And now I couldn't even think about faith because my emotion about faith was still in all of those old honestly, religious traumatic experiences.
For sure.
And I had to kind of work through that before I could finally separate it and say, oh my goodness, faith is a beautiful concept. Just having faith and being connected and believing in things that we can't see. And I even talking about it now, I feel how beautiful it is. But it's taken me years to get there because of that. Now, a lot of being able to do that separation, I am so grateful that I started meditating. I am so grateful I started meditating. And then right when we were about to leave, I told you I became value certified. And so to make it not so traumatic for my daughters who had grown up in this church and now they're young. So imagine just being like, just kidding, we don't believe this anymore.
Yeah.
Like that's traumatic.
For sure.
So we had and I used all of my values coaching, and I said, we get to decide the things that we liked in Mormonism that were important to us, and we're going to bring those with us, but we get to decide how we define them and what they look like in our life now. And that's what we're going to hold on to when we leave. So maybe we're not going to church anymore, but don't worry. We still have things to hold on to. And this is what we're holding on to. And this is what it's going to look like in our life. In Mormonism, family life is huge. It's beautiful. You know, every Monday night they have a family home evening. It's like, you guys, we can do family night all the time. We don't have to wait till Monday night. We can do, you know what I mean? Like, do we love that? Yes, let's keep doing that then. And we get to say how we want to do it, right? And now maybe mom and dad will have an alcohol drink with it. You know what I mean?
Like, maybe,
you know.
and it's you know it. I had a conversation with someone recently in which they were talking about this struggle, and you know, and I asked them, like, they were talking about all the things that they didn't get to do, and I was like, well, so are you going to go out and do all those things? And they were like, no, that's not the point. Isn't to rush out and drink coffee and do all these things. The point is the choice.
Yes.
And that choice should be mine, and not someone else on high who is telling me this because of this reason that I choose not to believe anymore.
Right. And that was, you know, and in addition to that, if you start drinking alcohol when you're 40, it's much different than when you start when you're 21. Like, you know what I'm saying? Your brain has developed. I had children. There was like all of these factors. And so it was so much more conscientious. It became very intentional, just like that person said.
Yeah.
That they got to have a choice. So I could say, well, I'm going to have an alcoholic drink now. Why?
Right.
For what purpose?
Yeah.
And I get to present that to my daughters that way.
Right.
So I'm presenting to them this ability to choose very intentionally these things that they have in their life that before were just like, you can't, you know. And now it's all of the things that you can't. Well, you can, but why do you want to? Because the thing is you said something earlier, and I can't remember, but all of those little things that were, you know, gates, you know, on our behavior, they are used when you're inside of the religion to say that you get freedom and blessings. So, you know, when we're going back to the phrase of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if I can separate my emotion from the thing, from being told I can never have coffee to why was I told never to have coffee? Can I think about that a little bit differently? I don't agree with any of those, so I'm good with that. Okay, well, I was also told that I would be more spiritual if I don't have alcohol inhibiting me. You change when you drink alcohol.
Sure.
You know, I mean, that's a fact. So, okay, that's a fascinating idea. Now I can have it. What does happen to me when I drink? Do I limit my spirit now? Do I limit my spirituality? Maybe there's a tiny, again, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now I drink alcohol, but I also really value the teaching that I had with me that said, what happens to you when you drink? Like, what happens to your spirituality? What happens to that? I've been intentional enough, and there's been enough mindfulness and paying, you know, and then struggle. It hasn't been easy, but now I can come back and processing emotion and processing mental health and processing religious trauma, that I can come back and say, that is very interesting to say that alcohol does inhibit my spirit. Now I still get to choose, but I hear the message.
Right. What was the hardest part as a parent, and the hardest part for your children to because you know, for you, all of the things you said about the high demand, but for them, I'm sure it was their friend group and their social circle. I don't know how old they were when you left, but I imagine that there was a number of tough conversations that you had to have with them, specifically, that had nothing to do with you thinking about this, but was specifically about how they were approaching leaving.
For sure, there have been thousands of conversations. I'm sure they're sick of it, and that and we circle around. My oldest daughters were 13 and 11 or something like that. And we moved to Oklahoma right at the same time. And it was honestly a different culture. It was totally different. So there were all of these factors simultaneously that happened. They talk all the time about how they get to be their most true version of themselves as well. My oldest daughter doesn't want to have children. And, that is really a woman's purpose, is to have children in the Mormon church.
Right.
My middle daughter is a lesbian. So, all of those things, I provided, I see now that I provided space for them to be who they truly are. I wonder what would have happened had we stayed there and these things came up for them. I don't know. Right. So they feel this way to be their truest sense now, but they still have this, they have their backpacks that they've brought with them, they still feel, kids, we moved, but also people can be in touch via social media, and so there's some things that they felt that it's difficult. I think the biggest struggle has been, in Mormonism, when you get married in the temple, you get married for forever, and I'm no longer married. And that's a hard family, but that's been the hardest, from my perspective, for the girls, because their perception was that the family is forever.
Right.
That indoctrination is just repeated. That's why I didn't drink coffee, so I could go into the temple, so I could be with my daughters forever. That's why I didn't show my shoulders, because that's a requirement to enter the temple, so that I could be with my family forever. So to say, okay, well, dad and mom don't live together, but we're still a family. It looks differently, right? It goes back to separating. It's redefining that. Like, dad will always be your dad. Mom will always be your mom. We're living our most truest self. Yes, I hear you. I feel the pain too of saying our family is going to be together forever versus that. Honestly, indoctrination over. Yeah. I mean, that's a hard one. That's
for sure. Hard one. For sure. Yeah. So what was the transition from I'm doing this work for myself, I'm doing this work for my kids, and for the life that I want, to I want to help others, by living, their values. I want to help kind of spread that message to others. What was that transition like? What was the aha moment there?
Multiple aha moments, talking with so many of my peer groups, either people I got on missions with or who had used to be Mormon. And, there's a wide variety of responses when you leave. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of, there's just so much. And I feel very strongly that one of the things that helped me is this phrase that you mentioned, that I've said a million times: I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that was using the values to transition. Like, you have to find some stability in this massive transition. And that was the stability. Now, did I make all the right choices? No. Was it easy? No. Am I over it? No. I'm still going through all. But those are the things that were so powerful and grounding and helped me so much. And when I had conversations with other people and I realized that for myself, And I realized how powerful that was for myself. And I was like, you can do the same thing too. This is not a magic potion. You get to
Right,
decide
right,
what you
right.
want to take with you. And it was like, yeah, there are miracles in my life. That was one of the things when at the very beginning when I left, I was like, I cannot deny these miracles. And I think one of them was the fact that I got value certified right at the moment where I was like, I can't handle this anymore. And that was a life-saving moment for me to be able to say to people, I just used what was important to me and followed that path, that very simple, what's important to you? How do you define it? What does it look like in your life? The very important things. And that's what I'm going to stick to in this crazy, insane time when people aren't talking to me anymore or telling me I'm evil or whatever. It's like, no, I already said that my family is really important to me and I'm going to keep focusing on my family, right? Instead of just the whole world crashing around you, because that's honestly what it feels like.
Yeah.
That's honestly what it feels like. It feels like you've just lost everything.
Yeah.
And
And your
so,
support, and you don't, your, what you would have thought your support systems were, you they're changing as well. So you don't even have access to how, where you would have turned in a similar,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. So, yeah. And like we moved to Oklahoma right when that happened. I'd never moved in my life and not just had an automatic community built in for things like my ex-husband was in the hospital a bunch and my mom was dying of cancer. People in the church used to bring me meals. And now I didn't have anybody to bring me meals. People used to help me take my daughters to do things, and now I didn't have to do that. So now I had to actively and proactively build a community. Well, I didn't know how to do that. I'd never done that before. I didn't know Oklahoma. I knew nothing. So I had to proactively build a community for logistics. Then I had to proactively build a community for spirituality. Well, I didn't know where to do that because no one believed what I believed. I mean, I could believe anything I wanted to. The world was this beautiful, wide open space. And there were moments where I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And there were moments like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to believe. I have no idea. So you have to rebuild this community when you've never even built a community before.
Yeah. What, so with that mindset, where do you start with with a new client that's coming on? Like, how do you, what's the process to defining what your values are?
Well, there's a couple of things. So you can just say what's really important to you, and that's a great conversation. But specifically when you're in the middle of this religious transition, there's something that's hard. And those are the biggest things that you start with. Like, so it's like, yeah, did you have a panic attack when you walked into Walmart in a tank top? All right, let's talk about that. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where you go from those points of the feel of the biggest disconnects, because some people's biggest disconnects are not other people's big disconnects. Somebody's like, I'm not interested in alcohol. I'm not interested in coffee. I've never had it. I don't care about it. But I live in Utah and every single one of my family members is Mormon. What am I going to do on Sunday when they see me not leave? What am I going to do when they come and they ask me over and over and they don't respect no? Because that happens. And they come find you and you move and you don't tell anybody your address and your phone number and they find you anyway.
Right.
I need to learn how to have boundaries. And that's the cool part about values. They can change. So when I identified my values right when I was leaving, it was very much about like learning how to define boundaries and all that kind of stuff. I don't feel that way now because I'm at a different point in my life now. So my values have changed based on this moment. So really one of the biggest things is looking at where somebody is feeling lost and alone in their life and things that might seem menial. Very much like a community. Okay, I still live in Utah. What am I going to do instead on Sunday? After you love having time to just sit around and not do anything. And then you start to feel lonely and you say, how do I build a community? Oh, okay. So community is important to you. That's a value right now? Yes. Okay. Then now let's talk about, well, how do you define community? Right? Because there's like, on mom's groups, and do you want to work out? And like, it could be a variety of things. So we ask a lot of questions of, could you tell me what that looks like in your life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you tell me what are you feeling lacking? And what are the steps we can take to make it not be lacking? And it's up to you. You get to choose that. That's the cool thing about
Yeah.
it.
Did you miss did you miss the ceremony? Like there is something um you know part of the disconnection that happens in throwing it all, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, is that there are parts of the being a part of a community, having Sunday, or depending on what
Right.
whatever your holy day is,
Yeah.
and that holy experience. There is something about that even when you leave, you miss. So, for example, for me, I miss the music, and
Me too.
and so I haven't figured out how to. I haven't figured out really how to replace that, except to say I can create that. I have to find ways to create that experience and that community outside of needing to go to church. And that tether that I feel, or that longing that I miss, which is the power of community. I can get that someplace else, but there's something there's there isn't much, at least yet, in my experience, that I've found that is quite as powerful when religion is working at its best.
Yes.
We don't always get there, but when it's at its
Yes.
best, there's something about the power of that connection that is hard to replace.
That is one that I don't have an answer for, because I have that same thing.
Rose, I thought you were going to figure this out for
Well, so I have thought a lot about music, and I've thought a lot about, music makes us feel a certain emotion. There, let me back up. There's two parts that affect that I loved. And it's so funny you said this. I literally was having this conversation, I think yesterday, with somebody. Ever since I moved to Oklahoma, I get these allergies and my voice is all raspy. And I was like, I can't imagine trying to be in a church choir anymore, because I'm all raspy. But I used to sing in a choir, and I miss that. I miss that so much. So the girls and I have done, beautiful. We've gone to religious ceremonies. There's some beautiful churches in Tulsa, just to hear the music, just to enjoy that. Now, I'm not singing in it, and it's not the same. I know that, but we've done that. We've done Christmas Mass. We've done all these beautiful churches where there's absolutely lovely choral music and even song. I still enjoy. I can go and just enjoy it, right?
Right.
But singing in a choir, I haven't found. I would love that. That would be great. I have no idea. But the other part is that music used to elicit emotions in me, and I loved that. And to make me want to be better, or feel spiritual. And so I become more purposeful in how and when I listen to certain music. So I like to run. And recently I've done this thing. I haven't told anybody this. This is fantastic. Recently, when I have started to run, I have started to sing too. And I am sure people think I'm crazy, but I have been connecting. I've had certain songs that lift me up, like that are more like motivational songs that make me feel the same emotion that I felt when I was in church, despite the fact it was a hymn and this is not a hymn. But the feeling was definitely a spiritual connection, definitely an elevation, a lifting up. And so I started to listen to them when I run, and sing along. And there's something about the physical connection in me singing. And I know people have been looking at me, I don't even care. But because I've been thinking a lot about how this music makes us feel this way, right? That makes us feel the emotion. And I think that's one of these blessings that I've had, these spiritual moments where it's like, well, you can still get that same feeling. The more time I spend outside of religion, and the more I meditate and the more I ponder it, the more I realize everything that I'm looking for is already in here. Right? Like I can find it in another way.
Yeah.
What I was trying to accomplish, what I missed, what the baby that I don't want to throw out, I'll find another way.
Right.
If it's important, I can find another way to get that feeling from music, right?
Yeah.
It might take a little while, but we sit on it and we ponder it, and then it will come to us, right?
Yeah. So. Cool. Well, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you 12 random questions
okay.
that are not connected to your faith.
Okay.
Well, that's not true, actually. I just ignore that.
Okay.
What is your wake-up ritual?
I wake up and I say things to myself in the morning, and they change what I say. I guess you could call it a prayer. I never used to, but I say mantras to myself. And then I connect with kind of that spiritual feeling inside of me until I get that connection. And then I get up and go.
What's one ingredient that you put on everything?
Oh my goodness. I don't put one thing on everything. I eat everything. I love all food. There's not one thing that I put on everything. Just give me all the foods.
if you were going to have a dinner party with 3 people, living or dead or fictional, who would you have at your party?
Oh, I definitely this dear friend I reconnected with just over the weekend. I'm forgetting her name because you're asking me. That's so funny. She was on a spiritual journey too. Her name is Nikki Johnson. Let's see. Oh, no. I don't know. My daughters are super fun. They're amazing. I don't know if I would have them too. I would have, that's a tough one. I have never thought about this before, but I kind of might have Jesus to be like, so what was your real deal? Like, how did it really go down?
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've received?
It'll all be okay.
What superpower do you wish you had?
Oh, that I didn't have to sleep.
What's your spirit animal?
Dolphin.
You said that running is your favorite way to work out.
I like lots of ways, but I also like running. Running is very spiritual for me. Maybe all the other ways aren't, but running has become spiritual for me. But keep going, yeah.
What's your favorite way to do nothing?
Ooh. A brain, as my mom used to call it, a brain candy book.
What's your favorite dessert?
Panna cotta.
Where do you want to travel next to?
Petra, Jordan.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
What's your favorite song?
Oh, depends on the mood. I have so many. Oh gosh. Favorite song? I'm really into this band lately called Blue October, and They have one called Spinning the Truth Around that I love. I could just listen on repeat. It's great.
What's one book that everyone should read?
Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. Oh, no. Love yourself like your life depends on it.
Okay. Who's the author?
I'd have to go grab it.
Okay.
I'll get it and we can put it in the comments, because truly we all need to read it. It's fantastic.
Okay. What's the biggest surprise you have experienced since being on your spiritual awakening?
The biggest surprise. Okay, this that I physically look different. I did not think so. I had a man ask me, actually, it was almost a year ago. He said, "Tell me, when did you start a weight loss journey?" And I was like, I knew I was more in shape, but I have 3 daughters. We don't own a weight thing. Like, I don't do that. Like, I don't diet. I don't do that. And I was like, oh yeah, it does look like that. But my physical body just was an extension of what was going on inside of my spirit. And I didn't realize that before. So I didn't realize I was going to have this physical transformation where I was going to look like a different person, but it reflected my spirit.
Yeah. What is, what would your Last Supper be?
Ooh, fresh, truly fresh, ripe avocados, oranges. Being from Northern California, both my parents were from Southern California. So all of the real fruit we get from the backyard, from the trees, right? Real oranges, avocados, kumquats, grapefruit. Like I would have it, mangoes, papaya. I would have it all.
Last question. When the movie of your life is written,
okay,
what will the title be?
Oh, she did hard things.
Cool. So lastly, thank you for all of that. Where can people find you on the socials? What's your primary social media platform? If people are interested in learning more about your values coaching, how can we get in contact?
For sure. Right now, mostly Facebook and Instagram, and connect with me there.
What's your handles?
Rose Hyatt, like the hotel, Hyatt. Very
Excellent.
direct. Yeah.
Rose, thank you so much for joining us. One of the things that sucks about this is I can't take notes because but I guess I can watch it again and take my notes then. It has been a pleasure, and
it's been wonderful. I have enjoyed it greatly.
Yes,
so thank you.
Amazing.
So much.
Stay on the path, and we'll see you on the road.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for joining Divine Disconnection. We'll see you back next week for more conversation about spirituality, mental well-being, and human connection. Peace.